We have had slight shocks here for 2 weeks, but are getting used to it.
At Sebastopol, the road leading from the main country highway to my residence at Gold Ridge was moved out of its place 3½ feet, making a crooked road out of one that but 1 minute before was straight.
Heavy earthquake incident here. We have damage downtown.
We advise we suffered a major earthquake. We have buildings off the foundation, people trapped, unpacked,
The Rogers Creek Fault is one of the main faults in the Bay Area. It has some of the biggest earthquakes we know from the geologic record. And my job has been to go out and find out about that history of large earthquakes on the fault. A large earthquake will rupture a fault starting down deep. Earthquakes typically start 5 to 10 miles down in the earth. And if the rupture is big enough, the fault will break clear up to the surface and break the ground surface. And you can get anywhere between 2 to 8 feet of movement in the matter of seconds along these faults during the truly big earthquakes. And I'm talking about upwards of a magnitude 7 to 7.5. Here we are standing along the active trace of the Rogers Creek Fault in the hills east of Petaluma. And the fault is nicely expressed in the landscape at this location by a low swale that runs along the base of this small ridge line. When the fault ruptures during a large earthquake, there are places where it opens a slight amount and creates a sag or depression into which stream deposits from this alluvial valley are deposited. Now we're on an exposure of the Rogers Creek Fault provided by the bank of the Rogers Creek, which is off to my right. And the fault is very well expressed here as dark, organic, rich stream deposits that are faulted up against this white diorite bedrock that has been quite weathered. The fault is this actual contact between those two deposits. The last time this fault moved, about 230 years ago, there was 5 or 6 feet of movement. And the movement was of a horizontal, lateral sense, bringing the organic rich material toward me and the white bedrock away from me. After both the 1906 earthquake and the 1969 earthquake, building damage was surveyed in Santa Rosa and found that the area of heaviest damage in 06 and in 1969 basically overlap and coincide, with the sort of center bullseye being right in the business district downtown. And this tells us that there really is something happening with the site conditions in Santa Rosa, because the earthquakes that caused this pattern were distinctly different. The fault does cross beneath Santa Rosa.
2 years ago, my wife and I moved Russian River Brewing Company to our current location in downtown Santa Rosa. During the construction process, we found that our building had to be earthquake retrofitted. Our building owner came in and took care of that. It was a very extensive project. The earthquake retrofit goes far beyond what you see through the front and back windows of our brewery. It goes 10 feet into the ground and all the way over to the ceiling, above the ceiling in the pub area of our restaurant.
Over time, as you have a new event that happens, whether that be the Northridge earthquake or the 1969 earthquake in Santa Rosa, the next codes that are revised are designed so that buildings won't fail like they were in that last event. The steel buildings, the connections on the steel buildings are much stronger. The bolting has high strength bolting to it. The types of welds in certain situations are required to be a much higher strength weld. You'll have a concrete block that's got a high structural strength to it. It's put in a mortar bed and then it's fully grouted with reinforcement. So these buildings are very strong. These are all different things that the materials have improved in the process also.
Most earthquakes can't be felt by people. They're too small. And so the most numerous earthquakes are not detected by humans, but can be picked up by seismographs. The seismologist will interpret the records so they can both locate the earthquake in space, where the earthquake happened, how deep it was, and the kind of movement. What kind of a fault did it occur on? And this information tells us a lot about how earthquakes occur, where they occur, and eventually why they occur. Geologists know from the mapping that they've done that there's a number of faults that lie beneath Rincon Valley. And these faults accommodate the transfer of slip from the Rogers Creek Fault over to the Mayakama Fault that pretty much starts around Santa Rosa and continues at least as far north as Willits and Ukiah. So it's sort of the major fault that takes off east of the Rogers Creek Fault. And beneath Rincon Valley, we have something called a pull-apart basin, which is an area in which we have extension and pulling that comes about over time through the transfer of slip across these various faults from the Rogers Creek to the Mayakama Fault. Santa Rosa sits on the Santa Rosa Plain, which is formed by loose sediment deposited by Santa Rosa Creek and by its tributaries. And soft, loose sediment is known to amplify ground shaking. That means that as the seismic waves come from the source of the earthquake, when they hit the soft sediment, they slow down and amplify. There are deep basins that lie just west of Santa Rosa. As the seismic waves travel through the ground and they hit a surface such as a bedrock interface, then a lot of those seismic waves are reflected and they can be focused into an area if the conditions are right. These kinds of studies that track where these faults lie is very important so that buildings can be built away from them. We really have to be prepared and expect that we could have a big event on the fault.
Sonoma County it's God's country. You know, anywhere we would live probably in America, there's going to be some sort of potential for natural disaster. Earthquakes happen to be what that is here in Santa Rosa, and it's just something that we'll deal with over time.